Welcome to Life School, Series 2, Bumps and Babies. As I record this today, I am currently 23 weeks and 4 days pregnant with my first baby, which I'm so excited to share I now know is a little girl. I'm still in the process of recording this series, and my plan was to start releasing episodes once I'd finished recording with all my wonderful guests. However, in light of the current global situation with coronavirus, recording for now is on hold. So I've decided to share with you the episodes I've recorded so far over the past couple of months. I know many of us are currently self-isolating at home with lots of time on our hands, so what better time to listen to your favourite podcasts or perhaps discover some new ones. As a first-time mum, pregnancy, birth and babies is a whole new world for me, and I personally want to educate myself as much as I can before my little one arrives. From positive birth stories, information on hypnobirthing, water births, C-sections, baby massage and more, I hope throughout this series I can shed some light on just some of the areas you may be worried about, or even just intrigued about. Thank you to all the incredible birth workers and women who have made this series possible so far, and thank you so much for listening. My guest for this episode is Candice Ford, a certified professional nutritional health coach and former competitive CrossFit athlete. Candice and her family recently moved from Dubai to Thailand, but I was lucky enough to sit down with her pre-lockdown while she was back in Dubai for a visit. Candice is definitely what I'd call a straightforward, positive birth advocate, and I absolutely loved hearing her raw, honest, and beautiful accounts of the birth of her 2 children. So, without further ado, here's my conversation with the awesome Candice. Happy listening! Candice, welcome to Life School.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being with me today.
Wonderful.
I know you've just flown in.
Yes.
So thank you for making time
for having me.
for us. So I wanted to start by talking about your pregnancies and births.
Mm-hmm.
So you have 2 little ones.
Yes.
So how did your 2 pregnancies compare? And can you talk me through both those, what I imagine to be very individual experiences?
Yes. It's interesting actually because both of my pregnancies were relatively similar. My energy in my pregnancies was very different. So in my body, it was very normal. And it's funny, especially in Dubai, in a city where we are trained to be exceptional or different or stand out, you come to something like pregnancy and it's like you want to be distinctly normal. The more normal, the more middle of the road, the more conventional you are, the better it is for
so
everybody. True. So when I fell pregnant with Rafe, I was 6 months post my last big competition, and I'd stayed relatively fit, so I was still training regularly, extremely fit, extremely lean, well muscled, so my body was in a different place ultimately to when I fell pregnant with Evie, and I'd been tracking kind of my period and my cycle for years, so I knew exactly this is the green week, this is when everything will happen. And we were extremely lucky. We fell pregnant the first month that we tried. And I knew at about 4.5 weeks when my period should have been coming, I was getting all of these period symptoms. And I was like, this is period symptoms, but they're not my period symptoms. So what's going on? We found out at 5.5 weeks, our 6-week scan, the confirmation scan, we already had a heartbeat. And then we were kind of on the road. That was it. You know, we're on this path now. No getting off the roller coaster. And a little bit of nausea in the first 3 months. And then we just continued to rock and roll, worked full time. I got very big very quickly. I don't have very big hips.
Did you?
Very quickly.
Did that surprise you?
No, because I have really narrow hips. And that pop when you start to show is kind of when your uterus pops up outside your pelvis. And so it made sense that I wouldn't go for very long without people noticing. But I remember at about 9.5 weeks having to pull the team together and tell them that I was pregnant, because if I don't do it now, they're either going to think I've just given up on life and I'm getting fat, because I was walking around looking like I'd had 3 back-to-back Christmas dinners. But more than that, my energy was terrible, so I just wasn't showing up. I could physically be there and not be mentally showing up, or I just wasn't coming in at all. I was like, I owe it to them to know that. Yeah,
so they don't start speculating that anything else is wrong.
Yeah, I know she stopped competing now, she's given up, and it was like, no, this is what's actually happening. But it was really normal. Some nausea, which I dealt, eat through the morning sickness. That was one of the big bits of advice that I had. We were doing hair mineral analysis at the time to make sure that all of our hormone and vitamin levels were perfect. Had been for about 1.5 years. So our hair mineral doctor said to me, morning sickness is essentially low blood sugar. So we know the old wives' tale of like you eat through your morning sickness, but I didn't know why. So as soon as he said morning sickness is low blood sugar, I was like, oh, no brainer. So it was like a yogurt in the morning to get something into my system and eating through. And then once I hit, I think 12 weeks overnight, the sickness stopped and just rocked on with this giant belly in tow.
And how quickly into your pregnancy did you start thinking about what sort of birth you might like to, obviously you can't plan these things 100%, but that you might like to have or try to have?
Yeah, so having been an athlete for so long and having been so embedded in the health and wellness and a lot of alternative health as well, my husband and I eat very well. We're very mindful of how we use food and lifestyle factors to supplement and support our bodies. And I'm also terrified of injections. I have tattoos, I have piercings, but I am terrified of injections.
Most people that have tattoos don't mind injections.
Yeah, but even to this day, and that was the worst part of being pregnant, was having to have blood drawn every time. I was just like, what, why?
And a lot of blood as well. It's not quick, is it?
No. And so I'd go in and I'd be like, be gentle with me, and the nurses would be like, do you need to lie down? I'm like, no, it's silly, it's in my head. But so I knew the thought of natural childbirth intimidated me less than the thought of them sticking a needle in my spine. I'm like, I'm going to be in labor having contractions, and I know in myself I deal with things through movement. You tell me to sit still and deal, I can't do. I'm always, whether I'm talking, I'll get very expressive, or if I always want to dance. Going into competitions, I'd always be dancing on the starting mat, and it was like movement works for me. So the thought of sitting still in labor and then having a needle put in, I'm like, no.
And then not even being able to move.
Yeah, exactly. So all of it was just like, no. And then knowing so much of the way we live nowadays, not just in pregnancy and birth, so much is medicated and over-medicated. And so very early on, and it was in fact our hair mineral doctor said to me, don't watch things like The Business of Being Born, but there's some great things out there. There's a documentary called, not One Born Every Minute. There's a great documentary called The Business of Being Born. And that's all about natural birth. And Ricky Lake, of all people, went on this journey exploring birth. And it's wonderful because it's very honest and very open, and it really empowers women to see what we are naturally designed to do and that this is still possible.
Oh, I must watch that.
Yeah, really, really good. And so that kind of sent me down a rabbit hole in the first trimester of watching a lot of things around midwife-led birth, hypnobirthing. That was how I found out about hypnobirthing. There's a woman called Ina May. She and her husband started a commune in the States in the 60s. And she delivered something like 3,000 babies without medicine. I think they had 2 deaths of 3,000 births. They had 1 emergency C-section. She delivered multiple 10-pound babies. And it was all just midwifery skills, community coming together, supporting the woman. And it was like, this makes sense to me.
But also from being from the UK, like I've been brought up believing that midwives deliver your baby.
Yes. Yeah.
And a doctor only comes in if there needs to be assistance or if there's something going wrong, basically.
Yeah. In the UK, you get referred to the consultant. That's your interaction with a doctor.
Yeah.
So my mum had 3 natural births. So that was also my background. But being here and having been here for, goodness, the best part of 10 years at that point, my birth experience as an adult was very much based in the Middle East, which is so strongly medically led. And because Rafe was due the middle of September, once we realised we wanted to do hypnobirthing, the hypnobirthing classes stop in the summer because everybody leaves. So the last course was in May. So I was in fact 18 weeks when we started our hypnobirthing, which was extremely early. But it also meant that I spent the first half of my pregnancy thinking about these things, and the second half of my pregnancy with the tools to have the hypnobirthing experience that I wanted. And we had a lot of friends that had trained through pregnancy. So for me, the first step was finding a doctor that was going to support me continuing to train, and also train with barbells, with gymnastics, still doing handstands, like doing things that are not considered normal for non-pregnant people. So I had a great doctor that really supported that. She was the first doctor here to deliver by water birth. So all of those pieces. And so then ended up doing the hypnobirthing. And so that really was very early on. And I'll never forget the welcome circle. There was 6 or 7 couples. And I say that's one thing I love about the way that Dubai's set up, when you're having a baby here, you pretty much have to be a woman with her husband in a room. So it kind of levels the playing field. And I remember sitting in this semicircle with all these couples, and some of the women were coming back from having cesareans and wanted to change their birth story. Others were first-time mums like me. And most of the dads looked a little bit like deers in headlights. And the women were either like, I want to be here, or like, I really hope this covers those concerns I have from before. And Ben and I have been the last ones to arrive. And the teacher, Jasmine, went around the room and she goes, well, we'll start with you guys.
I'm doing it with Jasmine.
Jasmine's amazing.
Yeah, I'm doing it with Jasmine.
And she comes around and she's like, right, first couple, we hear all these stories about birth. What do you think? And Ben's just, all 6'4" of him, casually in the chair, goes, well, we've been doing it for millions of years. Women are designed to do this. You look at every other mammal and there's no song and dance. They just go, nest, find a safe space, and they have a baby. We're designed to do this. We need to embrace that. And I was just like, oh, he's going to be with you. And all the other women were like, I want that husband. The guys were like, how can he be so calm? And that's just Ben through and through. Like, he's just such this like laid back surfer dude who still does all this deep dive rabbit hole research. So I'm like, well, if he's all right, I'll be all right.
So important as well to have that.
It is.
He's your rock at the end of the day, so that gives you strength.
And it really early on identified the role that he was going to play. And I don't think you need to have a super laid back husband or a super assertive husband, or you need the person that's going to work for you. And I think as a mum going into labor, you also need to kind of meet your husband where they are, because you may need all these things from them, but if they're not capable of giving you that, then you need to find, and that was what I loved about the hypnobirthing, particularly with Jasmine, because it is a much more extended course. She asks questions and facilitates conversation, and by starting to have those conversations, more conversations come. And so it meant that we were able to build our ideal birth plan together and build the vision that we had together. And it provided each of us the opportunity to step up the way that we needed to in order to support each other. Very early on, Ben would say things like, that's not going to work for me. He's like, cool, well then tell me what will. Yeah. And so we were able to craft the experience that we had. And I think that's why the hypnobirthing ultimately was invaluable to us. And really, as I say, informed that second half of the pregnancy, because it changed the vocabulary we had around the process.
I'm doing it with Jasmine in April, and I can't wait. Yeah. I'm so excited.
Is Rami excited?
I don't know if he's excited about he doesn't really know what hypnobirthing is. He's excited about the whole sort of journey that we're on. Yeah. But he's totally up for it. Cool. He's like, great, because I've shown him a few water births online, and he's like, why isn't she screaming? Why is it so calm? I'm like, this is what we're going to learn in hypnobirthing. Yeah. This is what we're going to learn, babe. He's like, oh, okay, great. Yeah. I think he's just down for whatever's going to make me feel comfortable. Yeah. But I'm excited to go on this journey together. Yeah. Because it's just a whole new world, isn't it?
It really is.
So you did the hypnobirthing with Jasmine, and so how was the birth?
Amazing and intense. And in hindsight, preferred is the wrong word. I would say I had more the birth I wanted with Rafe than I did with Evie. So both my births were completely unmedicated, which was ultimately what we wanted. It was a Saturday afternoon. And
How many weeks were you?
38 and a half.
Okay.
Both of them were 10 days early to the day. And that was another thing I said to you before, like, I've got really narrow hips. And so there was a part of me that was like, the hypnobirthing taught me that my body is not going to build a baby I can't give birth to. Yeah. And I really, really lent into that. And there was other things and other ideas that kind of flitted in and out of belief, but I had this firm and grounded belief my body is not going to build a baby I can't give birth to. And so towards the end of my pregnancy, when they would start to say, oh, he's above average, he was about a week bigger, quote unquote, as much as they can tell, than he should have been for his age. And then sure enough, 10 days early, ding, he's ready, let's go. So I just coached a kids class, and I had a new member of staff starting, this was the Saturday afternoon, a new member of staff starting the following morning. So I'm like, you know what, I'm done. I'm going to sit down and get the day's admin out of the way so that I can come in tomorrow morning, onboard this new coach, help her find her feet, because I'm really going to pop any day. And as I sat down to start doing the admin, I was like, I was really distracted in that class. That really wasn't fair on the kids. I just kept zoning out. And I know I'm getting, and I was having this little internal dialogue. And suddenly I sort of went, oh, and I wiggled in my chair. I'm like, what was that? And the only thing I can liken it to is like when you come on to a period. And I was like, oh, that was weird. And sat there and I'm like, no, okay, nothing, whatever. Kept working, then it happened again. So I was like, oh, okay, something's happening here. Didn't feel anything, just felt like a little bit wet. Went to the toilet, sorted myself out, I'm like, nothing to see, went back and it happened again. Just as a friend walked in who's got she'd just given birth about 6 months before, and I was like, Maria, come here. What does it feel like when your waters break? And she, bless her, was like, oh, ecstatic. And then went all teary, and I'm like, stop the emotions, give me an answer. And she said, go and sit down, just relax, and if you hear a trickle, then it started. So I went back and I sat, and sure enough, at first I'm like, there's nothing. I'm like, oh wait, I'm not relaxing. I sat back and relaxed. I was like, oh, okay, yeah. Came back out, and she was stood eagerly outside the door, and I was like, I think my waters are breaking. And that was my body starting to wind down, and hence being distracted. So I said to Ben, I'm like, my waters are breaking. He's like, okay, what do we do? And I'm like, I feel fine. We need to wind up. And luckily there was another coach in the gym, so we said, we're heading out. But we weren't ready. Nothing was in place. So Ben found a bin liner in the back of the car, sorted out the car, and I jumped in, and then we were driving back. And instead of being, we're going into labour, I was on the phone. Mother-in-law, can you come get the dogs? Mum, Dad, I think I'm going into labour, covering classes. And it was literally like laundry list. Called my best friend, where are you? She's like, we're in IKEA. I'm like, need you to come now, and I need your husband to install the car seat. I've gone into labour. It was all of these things. And so that was about 5 o'clock. And then by 8 o'clock, I was on the sofa, had a movie on in the background, had my feet in a foot bath. Ben was just about finished running around like a crazy person. And I sat down and I was getting mild cramps. And I sat and watched a funny movie. We'd called the doctor. And about 10 o'clock, she's like, look, if nothing else is happening, you go to bed. I'm going to bed. I'll see you at some point in the morning or at some point in the morning, essentially. So about midnight, we went up to bed, or 11. And I got into bed and I said to Ben, no, I'll sleep on your side because he was closer to the bathroom. You sleep on the other side. And I must have dozed for about 90 minutes, but then that just wasn't going to happen anymore. I was it was going from period pains to
so they were ramping up.
Yeah. Still good space between them. And so I moved into the bathroom. I'd heard all these stories about people labouring on the toilet. And I was like, I sat there for a bit and I'm like, this isn't doing anything. So I got in the bath and very quickly felt like I was sitting in my own fear. It was a very, very strange experience. But they were getting more intense. It was getting more real. And I was in the bath and I couldn't get comfortable. And we were in anyone that's ever lived in JVT, the bathtubs are enormous. So even, I didn't feel like a beached whale. I was in this mini swimming pool, but just couldn't get comfortable. But because I was in a body of water, I felt like all the emotion was in the water and I just couldn't escape it. And then I was very sick, quite, not violently sick. I just brought everything up. And Ben went, that's fear. I looked and rolled there, don't be so woo. And I was like, sat back down, I'm like, oh, it was. And it was like my body just got everything out. I got out the bath and then sat in the shower for a little bit, had the ball in the bathroom. And at that point I was like, this feels like it's getting accelerating. So we downloaded a little timer, again, didn't have that ready, or one of the apps we had. Anyway, started measuring between the contractions, and within about 30 minutes, I went from 6 to 5 to 4.5 to 4 to 3 to 3.5 to 2. And at that point, we wanted to stay at home as long as we could, but I looked at Ben and I was like, I can't handle sitting in the car with them this close together. And intuitively, I didn't feel like we needed to go, but I was like, I can't have them any closer together and be confined in the car.
And how was the pain at this point?
So, and this was the other thing that made us go, the contractions were lasting a full minute. And I felt like I could go for about 45 seconds using the hypnobirthing, using the breathing. And at the tail end, it would get it wasn't even pain so much, but it was like the intensity took the ability to use the tools away from me. And then it would pass and I'd be able to relax again. But once we hit that 2-minute window, I was like, I can't imagine Ben driving and not being able to hold him or not having him be able to hold me for that last 15 seconds. So I was like, no, it's time to go so that we can shift this nesting space from home to the room where we'll give birth. and just be there then and resettle. And so we went, and side tip, if you install your car seat before you go to hospital, don't put it behind your chair. So I got into the car, all I wanted to do was recline my chair, and it was like, boom. Like, no.
That's a good tip.
Yeah, so with Evie, it stayed in the car, in the boot. And so that was, in fact, that 20 minutes in the car was the 20 minutes that I led into the hypnobirthing more than anywhere else in my pregnancy. It was about 3:30 in the morning, so the roads were quiet. Ben was driving, and for the most part was able to just light touch massage, just tickle my tummy. And I just lay on my side, looking out the window, eyes glazed over, and just lent into my breathing and was humming.
And which hospital
moving.
were you at?
Medcare Women and Children.
Okay.
So the doctor that we were with had just left Al Zahra, gone to Saudi German. No, hadn't gone to Saudi. She'd left Al Zahra and gone to Medcare Women and Children, but she was only there for 3 or 4 months before she changed hospitals.
So how long a drive is this?
Probably about 20 minutes.
Okay.
So, and it was good in so much as we lived on the edge of JVT at the time. So it was a couple of speed bumps, and then it was Al Khail, went down Sakim, along Sheikh Zayed, and tucked in. So there wasn't a lot of corners, there wasn't a lot of bumps. It was fairly smooth. Pulled up outside, and I sat in the security guard's chair, and he could see I was pretty far along. And he's like, just park the car there, sir. We can move it in the morning, not a big deal. And so I kind of waddled in. He offered me a wheelchair, and I was like, no, I need to be moving. Waddled in, sat on the stairs, and we sort of made our way upstairs. And when we walked in, the nurses could see that I was pretty far along. Things were pretty close together. So they got me into the room, helped out as much as they could, so Ben wasn't gone for too long getting paperwork. And so then we were in our room, and things slowed down, but then they ramped back up quite quickly, and they checked me. That was one thing I wasn't prepared for, like the actual being checked of how far along you are. That was uncomfortable. That was probably the most invasive part. They came in and they kept trying to give me cannulas, and we need to give blood, and I'm like, no, I don't want. And they're like, no, so we have to. And Ben was really a buffer at that point. He's like, no, she doesn't want needles. And they're like, but sir. And he's like, does she need it? Is there a problem? They were like, no, but we might need it later. And he's like, if she needs it later, I will do it. He's like, don't worry, I'll make sure she drinks water. I'll make sure she does all these things that we knew from hypnobirthing were touch points for concern.
Yeah, and the things that you can push back on, that you have a right to push back on.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He's like, don't worry, I'll make sure she's drinking. I'll make sure she's using the toilet, but no needles. And so they respected that. And they also knew that I was Dr. Annie's patient, and she's very pro-natural, very relaxed, very laid back. So that really helped. And so they checked me, and they were like, oh, you're 3. And they looked at my face, huh? Maybe 3.5 centimeters. And I was like, but again, I knew chances are, no matter how open I'd been when we left home, the act of moving and de-nesting was probably going to have made me close up a little bit. So I was like, you know what? Fine. This is the touch point. This is our starting point. Get back into where we were. And we did really well. Progressed through very similar to home. I was able to breathe through the contractions. The tail end was quite intense. And I was like, okay, I'm through it. Let's get back. I'm actually feeling cramps talking about
my tummy's twitching.
And then I hit a wall. And again, they talk about this in hypnobirthing. You will hit a wall where some women will be like, right, that's it, I'm going home, I'm done now, or I can't do this anymore. Emotionally, that's I think where a lot of people, especially if you're in a medicated environment, you would then go, I'll just do whatever, you just give it to me. Yeah. So Ben was very good at keeping me on point. So as I started to get stuck, he asked me to come and check me again, and I was only 6 centimeters, and I was like, I feel like.
And how many hours is this now that you've been in the hospital?
Only a couple of hours.
Okay, so
I think
not
we
long.
got there at like 3:30, something like that. So this was probably like 4:30 or 5 o'clock. And yeah, I just didn't know what to do with myself at this point, and I couldn't. I was getting tired. And so I was then losing patience with this tough tail end of the contraction, and I was throwing myself around more and just like I was getting a bit out of control, which was not helping. I was struggling to go into myself. And that was when all the words came up. Ben, I can't do it. I don't want to be here. I can't do this anymore. And I don't think Ben was ready for that. Intellectually, we talked about this. I don't think he was ready for how charged those statements were going to be when they came up. And so he tried he sort of emptied the tool bag all over the floor, and is like, we're out of our plan. And in the end, he looked at me and he's like, right, come on, in the shower. And he took me, I tried to be on the Swiss ball, on the sofa, on the bed. I just couldn't. He's like, right, that's it, in the shower. And he put me on the Swiss ball, in the shower and I was bouncing with the water coming over my head and onto my tummy because this hospital wasn't geared up for a water birth. I'd already had this not great experience sitting in the bath, so even if there had been a tub, I don't think I would have got in. And I just bounced there on the ball, like, sat back, bouncing up and down, head rolling side to side. And I remember opening my eyes. And bear in mind, at this point, it's probably coming on for 4 or 4:30 in the morning. Ben really hasn't slept. We left the gym and he then, we hadn't packed the bag, but I'm like, don't worry, babe, I've got a list. So if I go into labour early, I'll print the list for you, you can pack the bag. So he'd run around like a headless chicken. So he was knackered. I remember opening my eyes, bouncing, and he was just sat on the toilet, head in his hands, just knackered, bless him. But I must have sat on that ball for 45 minutes and he didn't notice any of the contractions. Suddenly being on the ball and suddenly that weightlessness that you get from a Swiss ball and the water hitting my tummy, it was like the water was washing away the contractions and everything just ramped back down. I went back into myself like I'd felt in the car. Ben didn't notice. It was about 45 minutes and suddenly I was like, I can't be here anymore. And I got down on my hands and knees in the shower and had the water on my back. And it's hilarious. It's like primed for like some comedy replay. But I remember being on all fours on the shower floor, completely naked, looking up at Ben on the toilet seat going, I need a poo. And it wasn't a, I need a poo, get off the toilet. It was like I was just informing him, this is where we are now. And I look, I'm on all fours. And he's sort of looking at me and he's like, do I get up? Like, what would you need me to help you up? It's sort of this kind of, I hadn't said anything to him 45 minutes. And so he snapped out and been like, give me more, what do you need kind of thing. And I was like, I need to push. And that was it. That was,
because they say that's the feeling, right? Yeah. It's like, I need to poo.
Yeah, completely. And that's like, exactly what it was.
And that's when you know you need to push. Yeah. Like,
because as a first time mum, you've never had anything else pushed down in that area. This is what it is. Ben went, I'll get the nurse. So first thing, the maternity nurse, so not a midwife, nurse comes in and she went, oh dear, don't stay on the floor, come. And I'm like, I'm about to give birth, like don't try and pull me off the wet tiled floor. And I looked at her, rolled my eyes, went back to Ben and went, get Annie. My doctor, she's not even in the hospital at this point. Next thing, the nurse goes running out to get the midwife. The midwife comes in with an old, you know those like 90 dirham phones you get in the petrol station? Yeah. She had a white one of those in one hand, a silicone glove on the other hand with like jelly on it to check. She's like, dear, come back to the bed. And I was like, no, I'm like, check me here. She's like, well, I'll need to turn the shower off. I'm like, don't turn the shower off. I'll get wet. Yeah. And at this point, she was just trying to negotiate with me. And I looked back to Ben and went, get Annie now. So I stayed there. And then the midwife then went running out and was on the phone. Doctor, your patient's ready to go. And obviously, when they checked me at 6 centimeters and could see I was getting a bit out of control, they're like, first time mum, she's getting stuck at 6 centimeters. We'll go back to our station. Shift will be over. And it was that kind of energy of like a bit blasé, because the look of shock when they came running in to see me on the shower floor going, ready to push. And so I got up and went back to the bed, and I was bent over the bed with my elbows on the bed, legs straight, and was just breathing. And at this point, all I wanted to do was push. And at some point, 3, 4, 5 contractions later, I knew Annie lived really near the hospital. Mm-hmm. She came in, she's like, hey darling, how are you? And anyone that knows Dr. Annie, she's left now, but always stinks of fags, stinks of coffee. So she walks in at like 5:30, 5:45 in the morning with this waft of just like cigarettes and coffee. And I'm like, Annie's here. It's never been such a reassuring smell in my life. She just tickles me on the bottom of the back. All right, darling, let me just get sorted. She checked me where I was and she's like, okay, we got a few more minutes. And to me, I'm like, this baby's coming out now. She's like, no, it's okay. Come round to the other side of the bed. Let's monitor you. She like slops down on the sofa. Our trust was so deep that it didn't throw me off, and it actually then like really killed the tension in the room. And the maternity nurse checked my heartbeat, put the monitor on my belly. It was the other thing going through. They kept wanting to monitor me, and it was so uncomfortable because again, it made me lie still, and I needed the movement. So the monitor's on my belly. She's like, Annie's like, yeah, that's mummy's heartbeat. It's okay. Let's find the other. And she was very sing-songy, and she couldn't see the nurse not moving the monitor. And she's like, oh no, that's still mummy's heartbeat. Let's move it again. And she couldn't see. And suddenly Annie went, right, no, let's move it. And she went business completely. And I said to her, no, she's not moved the monitor. So Annie pushed her out the way and moved the monitor. She's like, okay, yeah, there's baby's heartbeat. Good. All right then. Candice, why don't you hop on the bed? And it was literally like an appointment. Like her tone was the same. Her energy was the same. And I got up on the bed and she's like, okay, next time you feel a contraction, you relax and you can start letting
Were you on
baby
your back?
come. No, I was both births on my knees with my elbows up over the back of the bed. So they'd sat the bed right up. So it was probably almost at 90 degrees. And I hung over the top of the bed on my knees, and that's how I gave birth to both my babies. I had no idea what was going to happen. I knew that lying on my back, if I didn't need to, was not going to help. So yeah, I was up over the bed, and yeah, Rafe spent about 45 minutes in the birth canal. And I will say, going into the shower, relaxing and those contractions passing, I went deep into hypnobirthing, and there was no pain. Mentally, I'd gone somewhere else. My body was doing what it needed to do. Wow. My consciousness had checked out. And it was a very strange feeling, like leaning over the bed, feeling this pressure, but the intensity, the uncomfortableness, it is pain, but it's not pain in the way that you cut your arm and it's painful. But the intensity of the contractions was gone, and there was no pain. And then he started moving down, and Annie was like, go very slowly, very slowly. And babies naturally come down and move back up, and come down and move back up, and it's their way of naturally stretching you to come out. And so that's what he did. And then he started to crown, and Ben was with me, but he was also kind of watching what was going on. And Annie's like, oh, we see baby's head. You know, Candice, if you reach down, you can feel his hair. And the position I couldn't, I think, because I was holding myself. And I remember saying to Ben, how much longer? And he was like, oh, 1 or 2. And Annie's like, no, we've got 6 or 7. We're going to take it gently. And all I can remember, Ben disappeared at one point to check our birth plan. And he offered the paperwork to Annie. And she was like, I think we don't need the birth plan anymore. We're here now.
Baby is almost out.
Too late, Ben, but okay. And I remember all I could think of was, with the next contraction, what noises are going to come out? I'm looking at your wallpaper thinking, yeah, I was a leopard, then I was a cheetah, yeah, I was probably a toucan at some point. And I remember with every contraction thinking, God, what noise is my body going to make now?
Primal.
And it was really, really primal. And yeah, he made his way out. And I remember at one point between contractions feeling him kicking, which is what the babies do. Your uterus creates this hard platform that baby basically marches on to make his way out. And it happened between contractions, but because he'd already dropped, I had this big void at the top of my tummy that I'd not felt for months. And I was like, he's kicking me. That was the only little bit of panic. And Annie's like, that's normal, darling, it's okay. And then, yeah, he made his way out. And I remember at the tail end, I went, oh, he's scratching me. And it had a little tear. And that was like, it felt just like being scratched.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, and he was born at 7:44. And I remember Annie tried to say, catch your baby. And I couldn't, whether it was because I was holding myself, I couldn't. And so I remember feeling him like plop down onto the bed underneath me. And Annie, and the next thing I remember was Annie saying, cord stopped, because we wanted delayed cord clamping, cord cutting. Cord stopped. Nurse, what time is it? And because Annie came with her, a midwife who hadn't been with me up until that point. And she went, time of birth 7:44, it's now 7:48. And for those 4 minutes, I have no idea where I went.
Wow.
Just was completely checked out. And at that point, Annie's like, okay, Candice, sit down, we need to move baby. And I couldn't, whether I didn't have the strength in my legs, because it was a good 45 minutes of him coming, whether I didn't have the strength in my legs or was still completely spaced out. So they cut the cord, slid him back a little bit and turned me over. And then he was immediately put skin to skin. He was quite high up, so he didn't do the birth crawl, which I'd hoped for, but he latched immediately and fed.
Oh, wow.
And Annie just checked him over in my arms and left us for an hour. Oh no, she didn't, because I had to deliver the placenta. That was the only medication I had with Rafe. She gave me a good 20-30 minutes. See, this whole section, my labour I remember more vividly. That first 30 minutes, I can hear it in the tone of my voice now. It was very different. And she gave me about 20 or 30 minutes. My placenta wasn't coming. And she said, there's a little bit more blood than I would like to see. I want to give you the injection. And the injection basically closes up the capillaries and helps the placenta release. And she said, there's a little bit more blood, we'll give you half dose. So I had that. And then she had to massage my tummy a little bit.
But that doesn't stop the feeling in your legs or anything, does it?
No.
So you can still get up and walk.
Yeah. It's literally, if a mother's bleeding quite heavily after the baby's born, it's an injection that they give you in your hip. And obviously by that point, the cord's been cut. It's a small dose. It doesn't really show up in your milk. We'd learned about this in hypnobirthing. Yeah. And Annie knew I wanted no medication, but she's like, we're at that point. We're going to medicate it now a little bit because there was more blood than I'd like to see. Placenta's not coming. You've had your half an hour. We're just going to do this. And she had to give me a deep massage. She tugged on the cord a little, like not pull it, but like tugged a little bit just to kind of, but I had nothing left. She's like, try and push, try and cough. But I mean, my abs were just, there was nothing. They've been stretched for 9 months. I've got no engagement when there's nothing here. And then it came, and that was a very strange feeling as well. But yeah, placenta came out intact. We checked it, and she left us. And we had our golden hour of just...
And how... Because I feel like I'm already... Well, from the minute I saw my positive test, you're thinking about that moment. How is it? Is it so surreal?
It's crazy. I've never felt unconditional love in that way before. There was no fireworks. I didn't cry. It just was. It was like my entire reality had shifted, and this was now normal. And it's funny. I went to a Birth Matters group in Thailand with a doula I know there, and it was just a coffee morning with mums to talk about their birth experience. And I really dived into where did I go for that 4 minutes. And it really feels like up until that point, Rafe's soul and my soul were physically connected to each other. Like we were beating off each other's heart. Like it was just, we were physically and emotionally linked. And there was something about the process of giving birth. Your baby's soul separates from you and comes into their own body. And there's this real sense that I went somewhere to let his soul go. It was very ethereal in that sense. And so yeah, I don't have words for it. Yeah, it's like he's suddenly here, and this is now normal. And this is like our
amazing.
Yeah, it is amazing.
And how did you feel afterwards?
Physically. It was very strange. I remember them moving me to the chair. I had a few stitches, so I was uncomfortable. They moved me to a wheelchair to go upstairs, and I felt weak because my abdomen had never done anything like that. Like it wasn't even like muscle fatigue. It was like there was nothing there. And I'd read that people feel like they've run a marathon. I didn't have ongoing pain. I just had this strange weakness, and I was very swollen down there just from this very elongated process of opening. And okay, if anybody's squeamish, this is going to sound like TMI, but I really wish that somebody had told me beforehand just how much you engorge and just how much bigger you get. Because you see a newborn baby, like how on earth is that going to come out of an area this small?
Yeah.
And in hypnobirthing, they talk about this like opening of the rose. And if you actually watch a video of a rose opening, when you think it's fully opened, it's only halfway, and it keeps blossoming and blossoming and blossoming. And I wasn't prepared after birth for how big everything was. And within a few days, everything kind of went back to normal size.
And also they say that the first time you go for a wee,
yeah,
like you're not prepared.
They'd already told me, because I'd had a couple of stitches. They're like, use the water hose as you pee and it will just help dilute everything. And so I did that, and that was great. The first poo was more scary. Oof. Scary. And actually when it came, like I think I had went 4 days without going, but that was my body's way of like
trying to prepare.
Well, also like, we're inflamed down here, we're not going to go right now. And then by the time I went, I was like, oh, I'm so nervous. And when I went, it was like soft and normal, and although I'd had a couple of stitches, they weren't at the back. There was no reason. And it was absolutely fine. I remember sitting on the toilet in our house going, mental note, Candice, remember for next time, this was really scary and it's not a big deal at all. But yeah, in the hospital, I was uncomfortable because of how swollen I was. I couldn't sit comfortably. I couldn't roll over or pick Rafe up and bring him back to me, which as an athlete and as physically strong as I was, that was very disconcerting. But essentially just my midline didn't exist. And it was probably about 6 or 7 days before I really felt that integration start to come back. But yeah, we stayed for 2 nights, which is the norm here. Because he was born early in the morning, we had the first night and we could have gone home the next day. But my dad flew in. So Rafe was born the Sunday morning, my dad flew in the Tuesday morning. And so I said to Ben, there's no point in going home and then having to bring the dogs and then having to deal with my dad coming. We may as well stay and we'll all go home together.
Yeah, and hospitals here are so lovely that why not? They're almost like hotels, aren't they?
For us. For Ben, like the chaise longue with a chair at the end so his feet didn't hang off.
He got the raw end of the deal a little bit.
But they were taking care of us. And there was, Spinney's, the hospital's just down the road from Spinney, so Ben was popping and getting like fresh fruit because he wasn't catered to. And there was a little fridge in the room. And it was like, you know what, the pressure's off. We don't have to worry about anything else. Yeah. And with Rafe, I had the cocooner and I pretty much just made them take the plastic cot away and he slept with me in the cocooner right up by my head. And then whenever they took him to weigh him or measure him, Ben went with him. Ben was the one that moved him, so he was never on his own. And he, I mean, literally, and this is why, for anybody that has or has had a really tough birth or a heavily medicated birth, or anyone that you hear about these women that like, my water's broken, 45 minutes the baby was here, and you only hear these sensational stories. You don't hear about the middle of the road, normal, in a process that you just want to be normal. And that's why, like, I sometimes feel bad that I'm like, well, I had this completely, textbook pregnancy. I had exactly the birth that I want. It was unmedicated, like, but that doesn't diminish the fact that I grew a whole human and gave birth naturally. Yeah,
but also I feel like you worked towards that. You did not just wing it. It wasn't like, I really want a natural birth, so let's hope that's what happens.
Fingers crossed.
And that's something that I'm starting to realise. You cannot know exactly what's going to happen, but what you can do is educate yourself and put certain things in place so that you give yourself the best chance.
Exactly.
And, I'm still really early on in my pregnancy, but it amazes me that friends that have already had children, now I speak to them, just sort of did wing it.
Yeah.
And some of them got away with it and they were super lucky, and some didn't. Some ended up having to have emergency C-sections, things that just quite traumatic. And I just think, I mean, just there's so many ways of getting this information now.
Yes.
There's not really an excuse.
And it also, as I said before, it enables these conversations. The conversations that Ben and I had. We had so many steps. Like, if this doesn't happen, then we'll go this way. If this doesn't happen, we'll go this way. And just by having had those conversations, I also knew that he stood by me when he could see I was struggling, and he pulled from his resource and like, let's try the shower. It's not something we discussed, but it's something we've heard about. Let's try it.
That's something Rami's already quite passionate about. He's like, I'm going to be your buffer.
Yeah.
Like, there's certain things I'm already like, I don't want that.
Yeah.
And I'm adamant that I want a doula. And he's like, well, if we can't have a doula, like, I'm going to be that person. Like, there's no way
and he
I'm going to let them do things.
Prepare for that to be the case.
And waiting until you're in the midst of it is not the right time to be making those kind of decisions.
My sister-in-law's like, well, I'm just going to go with the flow. And I'm like, please.
I mean,
whose flow? Because it's not your flow. It's not you and your partners.
Exactly. And I just think going with the flow here as well, where it's very medically led, when you are in the midst of that sort of like chaos, and then you've got someone saying, I think we need to do this, and you don't know the right questions to ask, or that's not the right time.
The cannula in my hand, I would have been so much less comfortable in the shower. I wouldn't have been able to come down onto all fours on the floor. Just that simple act of having that put in would have restricted my ability to move. Having the monitor strapped to my tummy, they're like, just 30 minutes. Within about 2 or 3 minutes, I'm like, enough has happened that they've heard the heartbeat, baby's fine, get it off me now. And I said, I remember twice sending Ben out to come and have them take it off me. So if they don't, I'm going to take it off. And yes, don't get me wrong. If you have any concerns, if there are any concerns for your baby, then we're immensely lucky to have all of these options. And equally, I think of all of my hypnobirthing group, I was the only one that had a completely non-medicated birth. And it doesn't make me any more special. It doesn't make me any less special. It doesn't negate from any other birth that happened. I had my birth experience. The fact that it was like, and there's this big thing like you had no medication, you had no drugs. That's because you're a CrossFit athlete. You know, you're strong like that. Like, actually, it's not. It's because that's what I chose and that's what I committed to. And there were plenty of times along the way that I could have said, give me something.
Yeah.
But I knew I didn't want that for myself or for my child. And that was my choice for us and for our family. And of all the mums, because obviously I did the hypnobirthing so early, I was the last one to give birth. And all of the other mums, like one of the VBAC mums had the natural birth, and that was her number one thing. And she's like, I got to about 6 or 7 centimeters, I got stuck, I opted for the epidural, but I still was using the hypnobirth.
Yeah.
And it was like, she used all of these resources and she walked away from her birth with satisfaction and respect for herself and love for the process that had happened.
That's what it's about, though.
Exactly.
It doesn't, just because you're doing hypnobirthing doesn't mean that you have to have a natural birth.
Yeah.
I'm still so early on in this process, but I feel this need to learn more because I feel like so many women don't get the birth that they want. And for some people, that's not 100% natural birth.
Yeah.
You just want to feel like you had an amazing experience.
Exactly.
And no one interfered with what you wanted.
And this is the biggest
however
part.
that looks,
Yeah.
you know?
So much satisfaction around birth comes from the mother being part of the choices. You know, had I had to have a C-section with either child, I know and I'm confident that we would have got to that point that I would have been a part of it.
Yes.
It wouldn't have been they're talking over there in the corner and they're wheeling me off and I don't know what's going on. And we'd had those conversations. If it happens, then I don't want Ben to stay with me. I want Ben to stay with Rafe. I knew there was context around these things if they did happen.
Yeah, for every eventuality. Yeah.
And it just, there's so little time in conversation for distinctly normal births and distinctly normal, 'cause they're not exciting, but actually they're normal because they're normal. And, you know, the vast majority of births are normal. And there may be an epidural, there may be gas and air, there may be some pathogen, you may be induced. And yes, as soon as you start to medicate, the chances of further medication increase. But this middle of the road, I went into hospital, I had a normal vaginal birth, we are fine, baby latched, and now I breastfeed.
Yeah.
That's normal. And that is what most people can expect to experience. It's only when you opt to do something different or in extreme cases that you have a different situation.
Yeah.
And as I say, we're immensely lucky to live in a society where we can afford to have emergency C-sections, where we have the skill set and the facilities available to us. And yet this whole group of normal mums having normal babies somehow gets overlooked in the process.
Yeah, and when I have little moments of panic where I think, I've actually got to give birth to this baby, I think this is what we're designed to do. And there's women all over the world giving birth unassisted, having their babies. It's just totally normal. Yeah. And you said with your little girl, your pregnancy was more or less the same, but you sort of mentioned that maybe for your little boy's birth, that was more what you had planned for. So what happened with your little girl?
So first of all, the pregnancy was about the same. I had a bit more nausea, a bit more sickness, but I actually put that down to the fact that I was also chasing a toddler around at the same time. And within about 2 months of falling pregnant, we entered into the process of selling our business. So there's a lot of things you probably don't want to do when you're pregnant and preparing a business for sale and having a toddler running around like a crazy person. The height of my morning sickness with Evie coincided with Rafe having 2 weeks off nursery. So I was just like, and of course then Ben couldn't be there because we owned the business together, so he was covering me at the gym. And so that was the first time Rafe watched TV, and I basically leveraged every Dubai service that was getting food delivered. And of course I'm pregnant, I have an 18-month-old, so there was no McDonald's. It was like the best quality food was being delivered. Those 2 weeks cost us a fortune. And I was just on the sofa and
just
it was
throw
like
money at it.
Yeah, exactly. Netflix, buy some new toys, ordering food, but we got through it. But I was much more tired. Whereas with Rafe, I could wake up in the morning and be like, oh, I'm tired. I can push that. My first client knew that if I woke up really knackered, that would push the session back. So I could go back to bed with Rafe. 18-month-old doesn't go, okay, mummy, you stay asleep.
Yeah, it's a different ball game.
Completely. So that was more intense. And I felt just the volume of stuff in my life much more quickly. So I remember, I think it's week 28, the odds of if you go into labour at week 27, you have a very slim chance of baby surviving. And then if you get to week 28, the odds of the baby surviving are much, much higher.
I've heard this.
And I remember getting to week 28 and going, all right, the odds are in our favour now, Evie. Anytime you want to come.
If you want to be early, babe, that's fine.
and it was that early. At 28 weeks, I'm like, whenever you're ready, sweetheart. And the pregnancy was no more difficult, but I think everything else in my life was just
There's a lot
intense.
more going on.
Yeah. And at 32 weeks, I was like, I'm done. And I'm not enjoying being pregnant anymore. I was getting Braxton Hicks, which I never had with Rafe. And they weren't uncomfortable. I was just tired.
Yeah.
And then when I finally went into labour, and I remember actually I'd kind of got over myself a bit. By like week 36 to week 38, I was a bit done. And then I kind of relaxed, and I'm like, 38 weeks, like this will be the right one. And I remember the Wednesday night sending Ben to Spinneys, and I'm like, can you just come back with all the cliched raspberry leaf tea, pineapple, something a bit spicy, and then just bring me back like some chips and some bread and a nice cheese. And I had like a real kind of picnic. And I watched, what is it, Salt, Acid, Fire, and it's a food documentary on Netflix, which was never my sort of thing. And I curled myself up and I watched this documentary and I ate all this food and I was so mellow. And in hindsight, it's exactly the same feeling I had when I coached that kids class and thought, God, I was away with the fairies.
Yeah.
And I just got into that state. I remember waking up at 5:22 the following morning and I was like, oh, okay, that was intense. But obviously I'd had all the Braxton Hicks. So I kept thinking I was getting started and I'm like, okay, go back to sleep. But it was strong enough that I checked the time on my phone, went back to sleep. Woke up at 5:36 to another one. I was like, okay, that was a little longer. Still only 10 or 15 seconds. And then again, and by about 6:10, and I was dozing between them. By about 6:10, I woke Ben. I was like, I think I'm getting started. And so he startled a bit. I'm like, super early, everything's fine, but I think we're getting started. So about 6:30, I got up. Rafe got up, and we had a real kind of chilled morning. He'd go and play with his toys. He's very laid back. So he was kind of having a play. I was getting some fruit chop for him. Ben was pottering around. He called his mum about 6:30 and was like, Candice thinks things are getting started, so plan to come over at some point. And I've been very clear that I didn't want to labour with my mother-in-law there, because knowing that we were leaving, we downsized to a one-bedroom flat, so it wasn't like we were in our big house anymore where we could tuck ourselves away. It was literally going to be a door between us and the living room. And so we took the dogs for a long walk, and going out I was okay, but by the time we were coming back I was kind of stopping to let the contraction pass and would walk again. And it was very calm, and it was a lovely cool morning, and it was just really peaceful. And about 9 o'clock, they'd come to about 6 minutes apart, and the doctor had warned us, it'll come on much more quickly this time.
Because it's your second baby.
Exactly. Your body knows what to do. And so I said to Ben, I think maybe we should think about going. And his mum had arrived by this point. They were playing. And I had this real thing in my head of I don't want to labour with my mother-in-law here. And it nothing to do with her. It was something in me. And I remember walking through the car park to the car, and intuitively I was like, it's too early, we shouldn't be going yet. And for some reason I got in the car, and it was City Hospital this time, so it was a much further drive, Motor City to City Hospital. And I got there and they checked me and I was like barely dilated. And I had a real sense, because City's a much bigger hospital, a real sense of walking up to the labour ward of, there were so many sick people around. I had to walk through a hospital to get there, and it was daytime, and we walked in and they were like, oh, are you here for a tour? Because I was very, very in myself. I was very insular, but I wasn't obviously in labour. And this midwife just never took me seriously. And so she set me up and she's like, you're barely 0.5 centimetre. I'll give you an hour. So I said, just to see if you can like get started again. And so I was lying there and I had this pressure of like, I have an hour to show up. So I was like trying to get into myself and trying to relax and trying to lean into all of these techniques, knowing that my labour was progressing before we got into the hospital. And at the same time, in the back of my mind, I had this like voice saying, open up, you got to open up, because if you're not open up, they're going to send you home. The last thing you want to do is get sent home. You got to, and so it was like this real torn feeling. And after about an hour, she's like, look, we've got no beds. You're not progressed far enough for me to give you a room yet. And she's like, and also they'll charge you if you check in now. And I'm like, the money's no object. I'm here for 2 days. I know I'm here for 2 days regardless. If I am in a room for the next 12 hours labouring, that doesn't faze me. I just don't want to be
you're paying for it regardless.
Yeah. So we go back to the car, and I said to Ben, she's like, just go for a walk around. And I'm like, I don't care all of this walk to bring your labour on. I want to nest. I want to feel safe. I want to feel secure, and I want to let this process start. It's not going to happen walking around a building full of sick people. So we were in the basement of City Hospital, full of cars. We had to start the ignition because it's fumey. So
what time of year is this as well?
November.
Oh, okay, so it wasn't boiling hot.
No, and we had already walked out of the hospital to like a little Zoom to get water and snacks and come back to the car. Because also at that point then I realised I'm not going into a very fast labour, and I've not eaten enough for this to now take the rest of the day. So we went and got some snacks. I got back to the hospital. Ben's like, what do you want to do? I was like, I just want to be lying down. Can we just go to the car? So we got to the car, and I was laying in the car, and we just had like music in the background, and all I could think was just doze, let your labour come on. And it was starting up again, but then I still had that voice, you can't go back in that hospital, don't let her send you home, hurry up, hurry up, hurry up, hurry up and relax and progress. And we went back up, and she's like, you're 3 centimetres, it's not going fast enough, you may as well go home. And she was really cold and really abrupt, and I'm like, you meant to be a midwife? City's known for their midwives, and I just wasn't getting it from her. And I don't know whether she thought I was rude, because I was trying to really just stay out of the physical environment. But she should
be used to that, though.
Yeah. And so we ended up going home. And of course, driving down Alcale Road, contractions started coming back. Got home, Rafe and Tony are like playing and watching TV, and Rafe's like, hey mummy, and I was just head down, went straight in because the labour had all restarted. And I remember bouncing on the ball, leaning over the bed. Ben closed all the curtains, didn't go in. I sat in the bath briefly, mostly to like have some essential oils and calm myself down, and then I laboured on the toilet. And with Rafe I didn't, with Evie I did. And with every contraction I was so relaxed. I peed a little bit with every contraction, just because I was like, just let I was at that point, I'm like, just let everything go. And then at about 4 o'clock, I curled up on the bed. I was like, I'm exhausted. Like the stress of all the back and forth. And then my contractions eased up again. They went to about 15 minutes apart, and they let me sleep, and they were intense. They were still full minute long. My body was still opening, but I would lay there and I'd sleep, and I'd wake up as it finished. Again, that same window with Rafe I struggle with, and I'd go back to sleep. And then but then of course I was home, and all I could think of was, don't go back to the hospital and get sent home again.
Yeah.
And so I was like, hang on a bit longer. And then I said to Ben, like, this is enough now. I'm not comfortable moving between the toilet and the bed, knowing that I want to relax fully, but I can't stay here. At some point, let's just go.
Yeah, you're kind of in limbo.
Exactly. And we went back, and I was like, I've got to be 6-7 centimetres. Like the intensity of contractions, the intensity of the opening sensation, how spaced out I feel. And of course we got to the hospital, and she's like, you're 3 centimetres. And I'm like, of course I am. I've got the same bloody nurse, because they work 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. This is 6:30 at this point. And I'm like, she's still there. And I think if she hadn't been there, I probably would have been like 8 centimetres. And I saw her and just contracted up. Anyway, I'm like, okay, can I have the water birth? And she's like, well, why don't you just go? I'm not going to check you. That's what she said. I'm not going to check you in yet. And I'm like, please don't make me leave. Please. And I was like desperate. She said, oh, no, I'm not going to make you leave. You can have a room, but I'm not going to check you in, because let's face it, you're not going to give birth before midnight. And if I check you in today, they'll charge you from today instead of from tomorrow. And so in her way, she was trying to help us out. And the water birthing room was gone. They're like, a lady's just given birth, but there's been a couple of complications, so we can't clear the room. So I'm like, just give me a room. I'm like, I know I don't need the tub. A water birth would have been nice, but I don't need it. As long as I've got a shower and a room. And so at 6:30, she moves me across. So about 10 to 7, I'm in the room, and she comes in with paperwork. And I'm literally like a couple of minutes apart, minute-long contractions. She walks in, and Ben was like pottering around, getting everything like set out that we wanted to hand. And I was just on the bed, and she's like, can you just fill this out for me? And so I did, and it was literally like a tick yes, no box. Tick the first box, and then went in deep back into myself. I don't know whether it was impatience or realization that I was really in labour.
Yeah.
And so I ticked the second box. So it took me about 10 minutes to tick 3 boxes. And she's like, I'm going to go and check you in now. Yeah, damn straight you are. And then she came back and wanted to take blood and put a cannula in. And this was a British midwife as well. So she's been educated in a non-medicated environment. And I'm like, no, I get bruises in my hands. I don't want one. Ben's like, I was like, well, if she has to have a blood transfusion. I had a healthy pregnancy.
Yeah, like, why would you need that?
And anyway, I managed to convince her to take a normal, like from the pit of my elbow, blood test to check my blood count. And then she left. And she's like, okay, well, I'm off shift now. That was about 7:10. And so I think at that point, I just took all my clothes off. I'm like, I don't need a caftan. I just want to be safe and nestled and have a baby now. And so I was labouring on the toilet again. Couldn't get comfortable in the shower. So I was like, I'm on the toilet. So all of that thought from the first pregnancy of labouring on the toilet, what? Evie and I, we were there. We were on that toilet.
That's where you're comfortable.
It was,
and it's happening. Then stay put.
Yeah. And then Asima came in. She knocked on the door and saw me on the toilet and just kind of, I don't know what noises I was making at this point. And she's like, all right, dear, I've just come to introduce myself. And she's like, oh, sorry, I'll leave you till you finish. And I was like, no, I'm labouring here. And she came in. And she's like, all right, are you okay? I am going to need to check you. And I'm like, are you sure, really? Like, it's really intense now. And at this point as well with Evie, my waters hadn't broken. With Rafe, they were breaking all the way home in the car. But with Evie, they hadn't, which was, again, completely different.
Yeah.
And so she kind of helped me over to the bed, and I just was bent over the bed, much like I was with Evie. And I had this distinct feeling that maybe I needed to poo. But at that point, I was like, well, it's been so all over the place. Maybe my body's just clearing out before we go into the
maybe I do
stage.
just need the loo.
Yeah. And so we come over the bed, and obviously this other midwife had briefed Asima to say that second time mum, but she was 3 centimeters. I've given her a room, but it's not going very fast. So she'd left me quite a while, like maybe 25 minutes before she came. She'd obviously seen other mums before she came to me, because this was about 10 to 8. So it'd been a good 40 minutes before she came in. And she realized very, very quickly that I was very close. And I was kneeling on the floor. The bed was quite low over the bed. And she's like, darling, I really need to check. You can get up on the bed. And I'm like, I don't think I can. Can you check me here? And she's like, let me see if I can. And she literally lay down on the floor to try and check me. And as she did, I had a contraction and the whole back of my body went round, and Evie's head came halfway into the birth canal. Wow. And I was like, she's coming out. And of course, at this point, Asima's like, yeah, because she could just see I was ready to go. And I was like, oh my God, she's halfway out. And Asima's like, it's okay, darling, it's okay. And I was like, she can't be born on the floor, like it's too hard. And I somehow managed to contract her back up and scrambled up onto the bed. And Asima was amazing. In the 5 or 10 minutes she'd been in the room, she immediately adopted all of the birth language that Ben was using, got me onto the bed. A maternity nurse, she'd realised and called a maternity nurse in, and she was very calm with me, adopting Ben's language, which I really noticed. And then I felt her lean back from me. She had her hands on my back and went, get me the delivery kit now. Like, very serious, very matter of fact. And I climbed up onto the bed.
Is this a midwife or a doctor? Midwife.
No one had even called my doctor at this point. Like, Dr. Britt was at home. It's like, she's 3 centimeters, she's nowhere near. And so I'm up on the bed, and I was like, okay, she's like, Candice, you're doing great. She's still adopting Ben's language, like stroking my back. And just before Asima had come in, I remember sitting on the toilet thinking, I'm never having another baby. I never want to be in labour again. I never want to give birth again. I'm done. And so all of that energy of the pregnancy, and much like you mentioned earlier about like having all of that positive energy to baby even when you're feeling emotional, I was saying like, Evie, this isn't you, this is me, but I'm over it. Me and myself, this is the end of my journey with this.
This isn't to do with you. I'm just,
I can't wait for you to be here, but my journey in this is over.
Yeah.
And so we were up on the bed, and I was expecting, I'm like, I'm going to have all these noises, I'm going to go deep into this again. I think I had 3 contractions. And Evie literally went to the bed.
Amazing.
And I remember the last contraction saying to Asima, you're scratching me. Because typically midwives and doctors will kind of hold you and support baby in case baby comes out fast. And it also reduces your risk of tearing because baby doesn't come out too quickly. So I was saying, Asima, you're scratching me. And I heard the maternity nurse behind me go, no, darling, that's your baby coming. Very gentle, very calm. And I was like, okay, because it was so much fun. Like with Rafe, I felt him like the ebb and flow.
This was quicker.
Very, very quick. So it was literally contraction, plop. And I say plop because my waters hadn't broken. So I had a few like golf ball sized like gushes.
So do your waters not necessarily have to break?
No.
In order? Okay, I didn't know that.
Yeah. So the final.
Then why do people always, you see on like One Born Every Minute, they're like, we need to break your waters.
To bring things on.
Is that just to get things to, but you were progressing anyway?
No one had even checked.
Okay.
And if you're progressing, it's fine. Typically, they'll give you a sweep instead of chemically inducing you to try and like scar your waters to encourage them to break, which will then bring things on. Or if women, get to 8-9 centimeters and they're not progressing, they might break your waters to try and bring it on. But you don't have to. I mean, some babies are born in the sac still. They're called angel babies, I think.
Yeah.
And so I'd had a few like gushes of my waters starting to break when I was just before I came out to meet Asima, and to meet her before I came out back to the bedroom. And so she was, whereas Rafe came out really covered in that thick waxy stuff, Eve came out clean as a whistle.
Wow.
And she came out very floppy, very, very floppy. And Asima had literally had 10 minutes to check my birth plan. And with Evie, because I hadn't gone to this deep space, as soon as she came out, I flipped over and they put her on my tummy. Whereas with Rafe, they did flip me before they cut his cord because I couldn't turn over because there was not, anyway. But she was clean as a whistle and she was so floppy. And Asima like wrapped her up and I could see her like really like watching her. She's like, she's a little floppy, darling. Okay, and she was rubbing her and I'm like, please don't clean her. And she's like, okay, darling, but she's a little floppy. And Asima let me continue to hold her. But by the end, she was really quite vigorously rubbing her with the towel. And then she sort of went, oh. And then she latched and fed. But I could see it needed to happen. But she was clean as a whistle because she'd still been swimming around until the moment she was born. They left me. And as I turned round, there was a maternity nurse, Ben, Asima, and then the consultant on-call doctor, because my doctor hadn't made it. And so this obviously, because in Dubai you have to give birth with a doctor present. So obviously the on-call OBGYN had kind of slipped into the room. So I had a midwife-led birth with Evie, and a doctor had slipped in at the end. So there had been a doctor present. And
just to sort of tick that box.
Yeah. She's like, hi, darling, congratulations. And I'm like, what is this?
Yeah, it's funny because I did a tour. I'm giving birth in Alzara, and I did a tour with a midwife, and I was the only one on the tour. And Rami couldn't come that day because of work, and I said, well, we can do another one. We've got 6 months. So I went, and it was just me and this midwife, this amazing Scouse girl, and I was like, how do I make sure that you're at my birth? First of all, are you here in July? She's like, I'm not going away until August. She was like, you just request me, it's fine. Because I just thought, we just had this, I just immediately connected with her, and I just thought, I want you to deliver my baby. And she knows my doctor, obviously, and she's like, a couple of times the doctor hasn't been able to get there in time, and I have been the one anyway. So in my mind, I hope that it kind of plays out that way, because I want a midwife.
And it was lovely, like at Asima, like, so literally this was 7:10, the midwife I didn't like left. 7:50 she came in. Evie was born at 8:26. So we got to the hospital at 6:30 and got poo-hooed at 3 centimeters. Within 2 hours I had a baby in my arms. And so it's just like, and again, it was the hypnobirthing, because all I wanted to do for that entire day was like, let me be in myself. Let me just do what my body and nature and everything around this process is designed to do.
Without being disturbed and having to keep moving. And I think it's a bit of a sort of time game, because I've been warned not to go to the hospital too early here, because that's when you're sort of on their clock then.
Exactly.
So if things aren't progressing how they would like, that's when they start to interfere.
And if your water, so with Rafe, I had like a balloon explosion water break, and I didn't even feel the slightest twinge for 3.5 hours. Had I gone, my waters are broken, let's go to the hospital, even though he was born within 14 hours, as you say, you're on their clock. And you won't progress as fast.
No, because I didn't know until I got pregnant and I started listening to podcasts and doing my research that you have to produce oxytocin to give birth, and adrenaline actually works against you. I had no idea. And I thought, that makes total sense.
That was that little voice in the back of my head saying, don't go back, don't get sent away,
and that's why when so many women, things are progressing really well, they get into the hospital, they get put on their backs, all these bright lights, and suddenly the adrenaline starts.
So they stop breathing.
And things start to slow down. And that, it totally makes sense. But I never knew that before.
So our uterus has 3 layers. And the middle of those 3 layers is just blood flow. It's just to get blood flow. Like if you go and do 20, 30, 50 squats, whatever it takes for you to get that burn sensation in your muscles, you need oxygenated blood to take away the lactic acid, take the burn away. Your uterus is doing work it's never done before with your first baby, with your first labor. It's like it needs that blood flow to keep the oxygenation. And they found increasingly that these women that go into emergency C-section because things have got more and more fraught and intense, they start the C-section and that middle layer that should be rosy red, reoxygenating the uterus, is white because they've held their breath, they've tensed up, and they've shut down the process chemically within their own body based on the environment that they're in. And it's like, what can you do to create a bubble around yourself? Having your husband as a buffer, having a team, going to a space that is familiar, music, smell, all of these things that create an environment where you're safe instead of this environment that is going to induce stress and offset where you are and where you want to be.
Yeah. That, honestly, thank you so much for sharing all of that. You have made me so excited.
And I love to, because we should be able to have this experience. And I'm not special, and I'm not one in a million.
But you know what it is? It's about
nature. Do what I did,
and
what
having trust in it,
exactly.
having trust in your body, but also being really conscious from day one. And that, I mean, I'm not a go with the flow sort of person anyway, but I'm so conscious to, okay, let me find out more about this. Let me know.
If you've cultivated your intuition, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so that's what it is. You don't have to be I'm the least laid back person. But I know what it is to trust my gut. I know what it is to trust my intuition. And the more you lean into that, and the more that you have faith in that, and as baby grows and you start to feel that connection, it becomes much, much easier. It's a muscle.
Do you think there's an element as well? Because there's part of me that is so excited to give birth as well. And I almost feel like it's something that I want to achieve. Like there's part of me that if baby has to come out another way, because that's what's right for my baby and its health, I'm absolutely fine with that. And I'll have planned so that I'm part of that decision. But there's also part of me that's like, there's no reason why, if everything's going fine and baby's okay, that I can't do this. And it's something I want to do.
Yeah.
Like I feel very, I don't know, like I want to do this. Like it's important to me. Whereas some of my friends are like, I really don't care. Just give me the drugs and get the baby out. Yeah. I don't care.
And I think as long as you don't move into a space of like, I'm doing birth, I'm doing labor, I'm doing, as long as you come to it intuitively, then it's okay. If you come to it as I'm going to do this thing, you can start to railroad the natural process. But I think if you go in with having had the conversations you need to have, having the awareness of where you are and a rough awareness of where your boundaries might be, because you may go into labor and find that your boundaries are way closer than you thought they were, or way further than you thought they were. But I think it's more about faith and trust and awareness than it is about, you can't go into this process gung-ho.
No.
Because you railroading your process is exactly the same as someone else railroading it. It really is about less is more, being, not doing. All of that kind of settle into your body and let the natural be. Yeah. And don't do the process, because there's plenty of other people that will come in and do birth for you. The more you can be in what you need, that's kind of how you'll show it's stepping into your power in a very, very feminine, natural, grounded way, instead of stepping into kind of an alpha energy, if that makes sense.
No, total sense. And it leads me on actually, because I want to talk a little bit about coaching. I did a coaching course last year and I loved it. When did you start coaching? How did this help with your birth, if it was before your children? And how has it helped with your parenting style as well?
So I knew at 17 I was going to coach. Initially I thought it'd be like executive business coaching. At 12 I wanted to be a professional devil's advocate. It was like, at the time I was like, well, I suppose asking powerful questions and challenging people's belief systems. 2013 I officially started the journey, although I knew as early as like 2006, and it was always CTI that I wanted to go with. Finally in 2013 I got out of my own way. I stopped playing small. I stopped letting my successful business and my other successes be the excuse to stop me doing what I knew I was supposed to be doing. And in the CTI process you do a fundamentals course, and it's basically a touch point of all the different modules and way of teaching. It's wonderful because you get a 2.5 day deep dive into coaching that you can then apply to life, or it's the first step on the journey. And I was watching people in this room grow and become better versions of themselves before my eyes in 2.5 days. And I felt like someone had just Chinese tortured me, like peeling one layer of skin off my chest at a time. I felt raw and exposed and lost and confused, and I didn't go back. And it took me 2 years, best part of 2 years, to get back in the classroom. And I started the beginning of December. And by the second course, I was 9 weeks pregnant. 9 weeks pregnant with Rafe. Yeah. So I actually did my training whilst pregnant. And I'd been coaching people in fitness for years. My degree was in HR. So I had a lot of people interaction anyway. So a lot of the skills around listening, intuition, trusting myself, I was already employing, but I didn't have the formal qualifications. So yeah, 2015 was when I really dived into the process, rolled straight from modules into 6-month certification. So I was meant to do the exam 2 days after Rafe was born, so obviously had to postpone that. But yeah, so my pregnancy was actually very embedded in coaching, and it was wonderful because I would coach people, and when I was really deeply connected with people, really at an intuitive level, and there was just a sense of being with them, Rafe would kick. And it wouldn't be like thrusty, stubborn kicking. It would sort of be almost like waves, like he was just swimming in the energy of the connection I was having. And it was an amazing reinforcement. And I remember driving home from those sessions thinking, why haven't I been doing this? Just this calm, and really felt in my power, but extremely calm, as opposed to this like amped up energy of powerfulness, but this like grounded, deep sense of self. And it was actually really wonderful, and I really thought about it at the time. How am I going to tap into that natural feedback loop that Rafe was such a fundamental part of when I was pregnant, once he was born? So that was a wonderful start of our relationship, and how coaching in my pregnancy really showed up. And I think it's really helped in the way that I listen.
Active listening.
And I think one of the biggest things, and it drives him nuts sometimes because like, don't coach me, I just want to talk to you, but my ability to talk to Ben and my awareness loop is much shorter now than it used to be, so I'll notice things sooner.
Yeah, it's one of the things I'm still getting to grips with, having done my course. I feel like my eyes have been opened, and I notice things that I just was oblivious to before with certain people in my life, and it's there's an adjustment period. You say you felt raw. I'm still since I finished my course, I haven't done any coaching and I haven't been coached. I've just needed time because everything looks different and I'm questioning everything. I'm confused. Like I've just needed time because it's a lot.
Yeah. And I think also this is somewhere that when you're ready to come back to it, coming back to coaching, to being coached, because there's always only so much that we can sort out in our own heads. And sometimes we have to say things out loud. Like talking about my birth stories now, there was a couple of things I remembered that I've not thought of before, because I haven't had this opportunity to, I've told my birth story before, but every time I tell it, something else comes up or something else connects.
And that's the power of coaching.
Yes.
That is why I love it so much. And I will find my way back to it. I know I will, because I believe in it so much. And it is just that simplicity of saying things out loud.
Yes.
But at the same time, I need to sort out my things. Like I just need to
and you'll know
recover from this huge kind of, it's like turning yourself inside out, and suddenly lights are being shone on things in your life, and I'm so glad, I'm happy about it, but I'm right now I'm in the middle of that discomfort. I'm muddling through it.
And that's the thing, you'll hit a point where you can't muddle anymore. Yeah. And it's that you need an external spotlight to shine some light behind you because you're not turned around yet. Or you'll move through it and you'll move into something new, and suddenly that new thing needs coaching. And I think the more that you are coached, the more you realize the value of it. Yeah. Like I often say to people, it's my job to help you get out of your own way. Like you're the expert in your life, but sometimes like we block out the light. Like trying to read a book with the light behind you. If you're blocking that light, you're not going to see what's on the page. Yeah. And I posted about this the other day because it was driving me nuts. I'm not here to fix anybody. I don't want to fix you. I saw that post. You're broken. I loved it. So many people do that. Oh, well, but we're not therapists. We're not counselors. We're not medically trained. We're not medical professionals. So if you come to me and you do legitimately have a medical condition, then I'm not the right person for you. And I will happily tell you that. But if you're stuck, or you're not where you know you could be, or you're playing small and you don't know how to stop, that's where I work and thrive. And I will hold a vision for you. I will hold your vision for you, and I will keep reminding you of it until you're ready to let go of the things that are holding you back.
I would love to have some coaching with you.
That'd be cool.
Right now, because I had a little bit of coaching before Christmas, and this gentleman that was coaching me just said something that resonated so deeply. And he basically said that imagine you're underwater and you can't see because there's so much sand, and you're just kicking up more sand. You're trying to fix everything. You're just trying to get busy to fix this, and you just need to get still. Yeah. So that's why I've also just had a little bit of a break from it, because I've just been being still. Yeah. And it's okay if certain things aren't happening. Lean into the things that are coming to you, like my podcast. I love it. I have the time and space to do it. So stop making excuses. Okay, it doesn't make you money, so I'll put that on hold for now. No, do it. Lean into it. So what are you waiting for? So that's another reason just to be a bit still, because that's not my natural instinct. Yes.
And that's the hardest part. There was
fighting those natural urges.
Someone quoted Tom Otten in a talk in Dubai he'd done, and I don't remember exactly, I've got a screenshot of it on my phone, but it was something along the lines of, I'm busy is the adult equivalent of the dog ate my homework. Yeah. And I was just like, that's it. Especially in Dubai, and this is where I'm being drawn to in my work. We are on this success train. You do this, you do this, you do this, you do this, you build up. And there's so many people. I see it more in women because I've just had children and I've had time to step back. But for men, it's even worse because they don't almost have the excuse of having a baby to step off. Yeah. And they become this perpetuated version of success, and they wake up and it's like success becomes these golden handcuffs. And they're like, well, I'm here. I know my track split. I should be way over there, but I'm stuck here because of the house and the rent and the dream job, and everybody says I should be so happy, and outwardly I am because I'm and it becomes this little voice in the back of their head that becomes like this underwater river that eventually corrodes the foundations of everything you believe in if you don't have the courage to step off. And I did it. I had a wonderful business and a community that I loved, and I was a successful athlete, and I knew even before I started that business, LifeSpark was meant to be a holistic health and lifestyle center, and we'd use CrossFit for health and fitness, but there would be nutrition and life coaching and all of these things that I knew were integral to being the best version of yourself. And then I became a CrossFit athlete, and I became very successful, and we became the first CrossFit gym in the Middle East, and then we were Reebok affiliated, and it was all these incredible things, and I was watching us change lives. But in the back of my mind, I always knew, this isn't what I'm supposed to be doing. And the more successful we became, the harder it was to step away from that.
The further you fell away from your sort of true calling.
Yes.
And I think Brené Brown says this quote about how people, especially women, wear exhaustion as a sort of badge of honor. Yeah. And I did that for quite a long time. But I then realized, I'm actually just working really hard. I'm not working smart.
And that's where that busyness comes in.
Why am I just exhausting? For what?
Yeah.
What is this even about? And I see that a lot, particularly with women. We just exhaust ourselves, and it's like a competition, like who's more exhausted.
Yeah.
And I don't want to live like that. I don't want to be exhausted all the time.
And I think the thing is that we don't have to. I think it was Tim Ferriss says that money's an amplifier. And so whether you're poor or you're rich, your values aren't going to change. The money will just amplify. And I think that's really apt, but I think children are even bigger amplifiers. They come along and they push your buttons. I've forgotten the author's name. The Conscious Parent is an incredible book, and she talks about children being here to teach parents the lessons they need to learn.
I'll include that in the show notes so
it's
people can check it out.
Yeah.
Do you know what's so funny? Because when I found out I was pregnant, I was so lost, and I've always just been really on to the next thing, busy, hustling, and like for all these different reasons, I was just at this point where I felt so lost, at a crossroads, don't know what I want to do, and found out I was pregnant, and I thought, this is perfect, because so many people worry about losing their identity and losing themselves, and I just thought, I'm ready for it. I'm so lost already. This is fine. This is the perfect
so many
timing.
People who, like, bringing a new person into your world, not just as a mother, but as a family, your relationship with Rami will fundamentally change. It will never be the same again. You will fundamentally change. He will fundamentally change. Nothing is ever going to be the same again. And that's actually pretty incredible. That moment they put Rafe into my arms, and it was, this is normal now. And it didn't feel like he was in my tummy, he has now come out. It wasn't this very linear journey. It's like, I've got this baby, Ben kind of connects when he kicks, I know what he's like in this capacity. And when he put him in my arms, it was a whole different thing. I was like, this is normal now, this is us now. And watching him and Evie kind of develop, and how they're going through phases of the ways and levels to which they interact with each other, watching his personality starting to form, looking at how different she is to him. It's this whole process again. And the biggest thing that they've taught me is my need to play. And that's a big non-negotiable for me now, is there must be play. I show up better for myself and for everybody around me if I bring play. And Rafe really reacts. If I won't play with him, or if I won't find the fun, he gets angry and he gets frustrated and he doesn't want to engage. And as soon as I get playful, if I treat misbehavior or silliness with humor, completely changes the way that he responds to it. It's an incredible process.
That thing you said about how they come to teach you the lessons that you need to learn, I think I've seen it with my mum. Like, I'm so close to my mum, and I can see how it unfolds. Yeah. And I cannot wait. Like, it's so incredible, and it's also, I feel so lucky as well that it's almost, touch wood, so far been relatively easy. Yeah. We thought, let's start trying, let's see.
This right here, this touch wood, it's
been... So what is that? Why do I feel... And why do I also feel slightly guilty...
That you're okay.
Not just that I'm okay, but when... because now I'm immersing myself in, Mums to Be world, and I'm going to all these sort of events and gatherings, and you hear about people's different journeys, and you almost sort of... a little bit shy to be like, well, we were going to try to get pregnant, and within a month I was pregnant, and
I feel,
aren't I lucky, and touch wood, and so far everything's okay, and it's
are you waiting for when it's not?
Exactly. Why is that?
And I remember going, the first time I went out with Rafe, he was 10 days old. I drove there. I went to one of the many, like, mum and baby meetups. There was a midwife there and a breastfeeding consultant. And I sat down, and the midwife walked in. She went, "Oh, look at you. How you doing?" And I'm like, "Yeah, no, we're good. First time out." She's like, "Oh, good for you." Then she came over, and she's like going like mum to mum, just checking in, because we all had very young babies, and because it was early September, Dubai was still pretty dead. And so it was a lot of mums that had either been here for the summer on their own or they'd given birth and there wasn't a lot of people around. And so she was going mum to mum, how are you doing? How are you doing? She came up to me, she's like, and I just started, Rafe had woken up, was feeding him. She's like, how's the feeding? I'm like, oh yeah, great. He latched within 5 minutes. He's doing really well. She went, oh, good for you. And she's like, and what about the sleep? I'm like, yeah, sleeps well. We co-sleep, co-feed. And she's like, okay, shh, don't tell anyone. And then we go over to weigh in and she weighs him and she's like, oh, solid weight, really good, well done. I'm like, yeah, he didn't lose any weight at birth and he's gained 500 grams every week. So for the first month, Rafe didn't lose any weight and he gained 500 grams every week, which was huge. And she's like, oh, shh, don't tell anyone. And it was suddenly, I had to keep all these secrets about the fact that I'd had a natural birth, that I'd left the house on my own 10 days old, that my baby could feed the way he should, and that my baby was gaining weight. And the feedback that I got was, oh, shh, don't tell anyone.
Because you might make the others feel less
and
of
I'm
a
like,
mother.
So what am I like, why are we making normal secret so that we don't upset somebody? Because now what you're telling these women that maybe didn't have a great birth or that have struggled with something is that this whole process is a struggle and that the next baby you have is going to be a struggle.
Because that's what we tend to hear.
I know. And this is why
all the podcasts I listen to tend to be about, especially around breastfeeding, about how hard it is.
I didn't know that breastfeeding was difficult. I remember my mum breastfeeding. I see people breastfeeding and I'm like, cool, well, you have a baby and then you breastfeed. I'd never met anyone that had struggled. And maybe I'm naive, maybe I wasn't tuned in. And then suddenly my friends started having babies and were going in with nerves around breastfeeding. And then lo and behold, they struggled. And it was, I'm like, how much of this is reality and how much of this is the perpetuated belief system that you have? Because I believed I could. I did. I've been prolific. I've donated a lot of milk to friends that have needed it. And it's never been an issue. Yeah. I've never had chapped nipples. Both of my children have latched well. It's never been painful. And I get really frustrated and I don't want to take away from anyone that has struggled or belittle their experience. But I also should be allowed to talk about the success that I've had. I should be able to empower women that this is the normal way for things to happen. And yes, I'm the first one to say, be prepared. If there are risks, don't take unnecessary risks. But also you deserve and you are designed to have a natural and a connected, and I'm not going to say easy, but you're not destined to have a torturous experience. That's not normal. And so any opportunity I get to talk about the birth that I had and the experience that I had, I'm so willing to share that because I don't take it for granted. And I'm grateful every day for being able to live my life as normal while growing my babies, to be able to have the birth experience that I'd hoped for and to have enjoyed that experience, to have been able to feed my children the way that I wanted to. And I'm immensely grateful, and it's normal.
And you shouldn't have to feel like you have to apologise for the fact that everything was smooth and wonderful. And my mum had two very straightforward, amazing natural births. My nana did, my grandma did. So in my sort of psyche growing up, we've never spoken about it in loads of detail until now. I'm pregnant, I want to know everything. But I've been brought up with, you have a baby and it's you know. My mum always said, you just feel like you need to do a big poo, baby comes out. There's never, I haven't been brought up with that. It's traumatic. It's like, I don't have that in me. So I'm really conscious to only listen to positive birth stories, only to watch positive birth videos, whatever they may be. They don't necessarily have to be water birth or natural.
As well of like, and I found with Rafe, the more I watched, the more I'd watch TV shows and I'd be like, that's not normal. And then once I had Rafe, I'm like, that's really not normal. Yeah. Because even when, unless the environment has made you start to panic, when that baby is coming down, my conscious mind and my physical body disconnected or stretched that connection. I wasn't in my body freaking out. Like when I got out of the way and let my body take over, things progressed. So if you're in your body and you're screaming, you're not, you've blocked, you've bypassed the natural.
And it's a waste of energy.
It is.
As well. But that's where the hypnobirthing, I think, is so powerful. And the amount of women that I know that have babies that have no idea what hypnobirthing is. And of course, it's not for everyone. But I think, isn't it a shame that whether it's society or things we see on TV, I feel like women now just... It is this trauma, and there's going to be lots of screaming, and I'm going to need drugs because it's going to be so painful.
Because also we're second, third generation, where Europe and the UK are different, but a lot of other countries, a lot of people have been born to parents where, well, we didn't have medicine before, we now have medicine. This is a medicated process. So that is the story and the psyche that they have. Yeah. And it's re-educating, and also we've lost that community. I've got some of my Emirati friends are like, birth is natural, it's what we're designed to do, and culturally it's a very deep part of their culture, but they also have really close-knit communities. I've got a lot of Emirati friends who'd attended a birth before they were pregnant themselves. They'd seen their, and when you have that tribal communal mentality, birth isn't this big scary thing. You've got girls at 10, 12, 13, 14, you will get married and you will have babies probably within the next 10 years. Yeah. And it's a very natural, organic, evolutionary process.
Well, it's the most natural thing in the world, isn't it?
And yet we're medicating and modernizing ourselves out of it. And I love that there's a resurgence back to natural.
But I love that there's people like yourself that are open and willing to talk about it, because I am looking for that content. I want to hear about a straightforward, lovely birth. Yeah. I want that. Yeah. And there isn't. You're right. Yeah. There really isn't a lot of it out there. Yeah.
And I'll tell you, it's intense and it's full on and it feels overwhelming at points, which is why you have an incredible environment around you. But it's not traumatic and it's not torturous and it's not any of these screaming, agonizing work. It's not. It's intense. Intense is the best way to describe it.
But then, of course, it's intense.
Exactly.
you're having a baby.
Bringing a whole new person into the world.
Okay, we're going to do a quick fire round. I honestly could talk to you.
I know, we're not going to stop otherwise.
Okay, quick fire round. Your one piece of advice for first-time mummies listening.
Trust your intuition. So many people ask me, what are you worried about? The only thing I was worried about, not even worried, said, I don't know what I don't know. Because everything else you know. So trust yourself.
One thing you've learnt about yourself after becoming a mum.
I'm not a mumsy mum. I took a year off for Evie. A big part of why, we sold our business and we chose to leave Dubai was because it wasn't right for our family. But having this year off, I needed it, but I needed it to recover from the intensity. I didn't need to have a year with Evie. It was wonderful, but I didn't need it. I need my work. I want to be my children's superhero. And to do that, I need to express myself through my work. I'm not built to dedicate myself to them. And I didn't think I was, but I didn't know. And that's something I really know now.
Well, you certainly don't look like a mumsy mum, I can tell you that much. What's one thing you wish someone had warned you about before you became a mum?
You will need help. I underestimated that with Rafe. He was able to slot into our business because we had our own business. And then the first 6 months, my dad came out 4 or 5 times and we were so overwhelmed. And the last time he was here, he said to me, Candice, this baby, I love you, I love being here, but this baby isn't going anywhere. You need to get some help. And Rafe started nursery. 2 weeks
this
later.
Baby isn't going anywhere. Yeah. I love that.
That I wasn't prepared for.
Favourite thing about being a mum?
Right now, and it changes constantly. Right now, Evie comes into our bed between 1 and 5 a.m. because she's still feeding and she'll co-sleep the rest of the night. And when she wakes up, she has a thing now, she sits on my belly and Ben's been doing row, row, row your boat with her. And so now she loves it. So she grabs my hand and she does row, row, row your boat. And then we practice her words. Can you say daddy? Can you say mummy? Can you say Rafe? And then some mornings Rafe will come in as well. And he's super boisterous and doesn't know his own strength and ends up kicking us all over the place. But when the pair of them will lean in and cuddle. Right now, that's And I think it changes. It's constantly evolving. But right now, that's my favourite. It's the little moments. It's nothing
I have
big.
a lot of pictures of, there's only 15 months between me and my brother. And apparently I just loved him. I was obsessed with him. And I thought he was my baby. And there's so many pictures of me like kissing him and cuddling him. And it's so sweet. Yeah. That makes me want to have another one like quite close together, because I'm like, it's so beautiful.
Yeah.
Okay, last question. What does motherhood mean to you in 3 words?
Embrace the moment. Embrace the phase. Something there. Because just as you're in the thick of it, and just as you're coming out and you realise this is just a phase, you're into a new one. And so for better or worse, embrace the phase. And
I think that can be applied to your pregnancy as well, because I think I'm already catching myself sort of, I can't wait for the next. Yeah, and it's like, just enjoy this moment, because that we're not going to get this time back. So I think, not even pregnancy, any stage of your life, but I think for me right now, that can really be applied now. That
was what I was going to say, actually. If you embrace the phase in every chapter of your life, it's just going to pull you into the little things. Go to the cinema now, because when that baby
we went last night.
Yes, keep doing it. People advised me, and I was like, whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, embrace the phase.
Yeah, I'm also enjoying being able to, nap whenever I want and sleep in, and I am genuinely enjoying those moments, because I know that will change, and
you'll never have another pregnancy like this either.
Yeah. That's something I'm definitely going to take away from this today, amongst quite a few other things that you've said that have just really made me think in a really amazing way. So thank you so much.
You're so welcome.
And the couple of things, the books that you've mentioned, or the documentary, I'll tag in the show notes so people can find it.
And then nice little touch points. You start there, and that world will start to open up as well.
Yeah. But thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
And let's see what the next month has in store. Thank
Embrace
you.
the face.
I will. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you once again to Candice for her time and refreshing honesty. You can find links to Candice's social pages and website in the show notes below. If you'd like to find out who my guests will be on the next episode of Bumps and Babies, please do follow us on Instagram @LifeSchoolME, where you can keep up to date with all our news and find information on all our amazing guests. And finally, I would be so grateful if you could show some love and please rate, review, and subscribe to Life School ME, the podcast, to help us reach and hopefully inspire more listeners. Thank you for listening to Life School. Conversations to inspire action.